Well, hey there. Welcome to Jefferson Liberty Radio. Before we get started with this episode, I do want to note that this is a replay episode. That means you've actually heard this before if you've been listening to our show for a while. So if you're interested in hearing more of our episodes, you can head over to jeffersonlibertyradio.com. You can also find more information about us on Facebook. Tap that show note link for our Facebook page. Enjoy this episode. We felt it was a really important episode to replay and re-listen to this week. We weren't able to get out a podcast due to some difficulties, technical and content-wise. So enjoy this episode, and the time has come for 51. Well, welcome to Jefferson Liberty Radio, the voice of the state of Jefferson in the Central Valley. I am Matthew. Pat is actually out this week. She's traveling, so keep her in your prayers for safe travels. I am joined today by Aaron and John. How are you gents today?
Great. Thanks, Matthew. How you doing?
Good.
Doing fantastic. Before we get started with this week's episode, I wanted to tell you about our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Al Certified Safe and Lock. Al offers locksmithing services and alarm systems for a range of applications, including burglary, fire, tamper, medical emergencies, and much more. Al's has been locally owned and managed in Modesto for nearly 70 years, and with thousands of loyal and satisfied customers, you can be sure Al's will not only meet but exceed your needs. For more information, call 1-800-700-4780 or go to alsalarm.com. That's ALSALARM.com. Thank you so much to Al Certified Safe and Lock for sponsoring our show. Aaron, I'm turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to talk a little bit about HR-1, which is a new bill introduced by House Democrats. I know John has some interesting information on that, but they're looking to seize control of state elections is pretty much what it's about. Is they're going to try to centralize more government. I know it's been in the news lately, the government shut down on the border wall, but not as much been paid attention to this HR-1, which I think we need to go over that. John, do you have something for us?
Right. Well, hidden deep in this HR-1, which, what did they call that? The For the People Act or something? I believe it's actually deals with voting. Our local representative, Josh Harder, will tell you it's meant to get money out of politics, but hidden deep in the bill, Section 2201, findings related to District of Columbia statehood. They're going to give the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. statehood in this bill. 700,000 residents of Washington, D.C. will get a House of Representative member, get themselves 2 senators, all hidden in a bill that our elected representatives are saying is going to get the money out of the voting system. Find it hard to believe that they don't know that there's at least 5 other statehood split movements going on, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think with it being such a liberal district, soon to be state, I guess, if this bill passes, well, you're certain that they're going to be just Democrats. They're looking to centralize their power in Congress.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, they're going off the Article 4, Section 3 state split or admittance that several areas are using for their argument. We're using it here in California with the State of Jefferson movement, which, we at Jefferson Liberty Radio are pro-Jefferson statehood. We have Washington with the Liberty statehood movement.
Yeah.
Illinois is breaking away, wanting to do their own statehood movement. One other that I don't necessarily recommend supporting going on here in California as well, and a couple others throughout the nation where patriots are trying to split away. And I personally have talked to Josh Harder, California District 10 rep, and he hasn't amended Section 2201 of this bill to include Jefferson. Why not? He hasn't even amended it to include Liberty or the Illinois movement. How come he hasn't done that? I've approached him personally and asked him to address several issues. But here, after Linda Payne last week asked us to research HR-1 and become educated, I find this buried in there to give the District of Columbia statehood. It doesn't belong in a bill that's supposedly going to get money out of politics. This thing allows people same-day registration to vote. How are we going to make sure people are citizens? How are we going to make sure that they actually have the right to vote? This is a bad bill. I think we need to let all our representatives know it's a bad bill. Unfortunately, mine will probably support it.
Yeah, I agree. Just some few details of HR-1. Forces states to implement mandatory voter registration. Also mandates that states allow all felons to vote. And I think that's a bit of a mistake. But anyway, on to the next thing. It would force states to have extended periods of early voting, which that's something that early voting, I think Linda Payne had mentioned that getting rid of the early voting would help alleviate a lot of voter fraud. And that it mandate also that early voting sites be near bus or subway routes, I guess, to make it easier for people to get, obviously, to their polling place. It undermines the First Amendment by exerting government control over political speech and undoing the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. So it's also there. We were talking about the same-day voter registration. Mandates the same-day voter registration, which would obliterate the state registration procedures. So as you can see, they're trying to take the power away from the states. Same-day voter registration is also a practice that enabled sufficient voter fraud in Minnesota to give Al Franken a seat in the Senate, if you remember Al Franken.
Oh, good old Al Franken, huh?
Yeah, Mr. Grabby Grab. So it limits the state's ability to cooperate to see who is registered in multiple states at the same time. Democrat congressional nominee Wendy Rosen was able to vote for President Barack Obama twice in the same election in Maryland and Florida, which is a federal felony. And that's because Maryland does not participate in interstate cross-checks of rolls. One final thing I think is important is it would nullify state laws that permit election observers to work as partners with election officials to file formal challenges to suspicious voter registration. So election watchdogs have been essential players in ensuring that the dead and ineligible do not cast ballots. But now we see that it opens the door wide open for voter fraud.
Yeah, it's just a bad deal all the way around.
Yes.
And
the Democrats know that they can rely on leftist lawyers who populate the bowels of DOJ voting section to oppose voter ID, citizenship verification, and any other law that might impact their ideological and partisan preferences. So I guess you could say also that these same lawyers abused this power when it was in effect, despite being sanctioned repeatedly by the federal courts for abusing it. The lawyers who abused the power are still employed and enjoying sojourns as opinion columnists in the Washington Post. Another liberal fish wrap.
Well, instead of like HR-1, there's so many other things we could do to improve our representation, our ability to elect people to represent us. If I want to donate $25 to a candidate such as Ted House, I should be able to donate $25. If a corporation wants to donate $2,500, $10,000, corporation's its own legal entity under the law. You should be able to donate whatever you want to the candidate of your choice. They want to bring this bill out. I encourage everyone to read it, search it, at least skim it. You'll see that it's not about changing anything. It's about stripping more liberty from us, more of our state's authority from our states.
Yes.
States have the right to run our elections however we want. Unfortunately, in California, We have several different things that harm our elections. We talked with Linda about last week, the early voting. I'm totally with Linda Payne in the Election Integrity Project, where we need to cut the voting back to 1 or 2 days. Make it a Saturday. I'm all for making voting accessible to everyone, but we don't need to have a month to vote, 2 months to vote. We don't need to have same-day registration. As if you can't get yourself down to the county registrar of voters or the DMV in California now, a month before the election day, well, we probably don't need you voting anyways, because you probably haven't educated yourself on the process, number one, or on the issues, number two.
That's right.
That the House of Representatives would bring garbage forth like this, HR-1, and later we'll discuss HR-8 and HR-1112, is ridiculous. I mean, in 1929, they froze our representation at 435 seats in the House. Our forefathers never intended for that to be the case. They put a floor on representation at 1 for 30,000. Could have no more than one representative for 30,000 people. But I don't think at the same time they ever expected an open ceiling on it, where we're 750,000 persons per federal representative now. In 1929, when they froze that, we were around 250,000 per representative. That's even, real high.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to Josh Harder several times about repealing the Apportionment Act of 1929. Spoken with his chief of staff. No one has called me back. And, I think those things are important to our goal of a state split in California as well. We need to do something on the federal level too. If we're saying in California at 500,000, specifically with the Jefferson movement, we're saying we have 500,000 people represented by an assembly person, and that's too much. Well, I think every one of us needs to be screaming at our United States representatives about 750,000 being too much. And I would think that we all in Jefferson would pick up that mantra and run with it.
I agree. So if you want, on the running back real quick to the information on HR-1, which is, like we say, it's seizing the control of the states, of usurping the state's power in elections. So if you want to go and have more information broken down into a little bit of a more of a summary fashion, like your Cliff Notes version, you can go to www.diogenesismiddlefinger.com, and that's DIOGENESMIDDLEFINGER.com.
We'll have that link in the show notes as well.
What was the name of that site again?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Middle Finger?
Diogenes Middle Finger.
Tell us how you really feel.
We'll just throw that show note, or the link in the show notes, so you can go to your show notes and tap on the link rather than having to type all that in for you.
Great.
You couldn't have found a different website for that, huh?
Yeah,
I'm sure somebody else had a breakdown that wasn't Middle Finger there.
We're trying to keep this PG, Aaron.
Oh, sorry. I'll try to keep it clean.
He doesn't even have his MAGA hat on tonight.
Yeah, so there's a news of the day with a healthy dose of snark.
There's a couple other bills that we wanted to discuss tonight. That would have been House Resolution number 8 and House Resolution 1112. The U.S. House Judiciary Committee recently passed H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112, and they've been sent to the U.S. floor for a vote that could happen as early as this week. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Bloomberg style gun control bills here designed to score political points with the base is all they are. The bills won't have any impact on crime or criminals. They don't address America's broken mental health system, and they definitely don't address the underlying causes of gun violence. The big thing in my mind is they're strictly usurping the authority of the Constitution. They're usurping the authority of we the people. When they bring bills like this to the floor, they know better. They know this is treasonous behavior. They can make no law in the House, in the Senate. The presidents can make no executive order. The courts, in my opinion, the way I read the Constitution, can't even rule on an armament law because it should never be made in the first place. The pen I'm holding in my hand, if used for military weaponry purposes, is an armament. Bottom line. Now, there's some things that HR-8 does that are pretty shady there, and I think we need to talk about it. Don't you, Aaron?
I agree. I guess BIC may be our new military contractor for weapons in the field these days.
Hey, any weapon for military armament.
Anything, yeah, I agree. Okay, so basically what happens here is we're going to get, you're making the law-abiding gun owner a criminal. Now, of course, the criminals aren't going to give up any of their guns. Of course, they're going to keep, pretty soon it's going to be only the police and the military and the criminals that have guns. Anyway, back to HR-8, it criminalizes the private transfer of firearms and targets law-abiding gun owners for persecution, basically. It would make criminals out of law-abiding gun owners for simply loaning a firearm to a friend or some family member. This bill would not stop criminals from obtaining guns because criminals do not comply with the law. The legislation would be unenforceable without federal gun registration. So there's another list they want to put you on. Yet another government list that I don't think I want to be on.
Well, not just that. They don't have the authority to establish that list. There's no call in the Constitution for them to even bring bills like this forward.
That's right.
First of all, this HR-8 is a bad deal. Say my neighbor Jane Doe is being, assaulted on a daily basis by John Doe, the spouse or the significant other, and I happen to have an extra handgun. I loan her said handgun. I've just become a felon, and all I'm trying to do is allow her to protect herself. It's ridiculous. We should be able to loan, borrow, lease or sell our weapons at will. Without a list, without a transfer, there should be none of that to begin with.
Yeah, and it's a little bit outrageous to think that if you're out in the field hunting and with your buddy and you guys are hunting some deer or whatever you may be hunting, bears, or you're going to loan your buddy a gun to try out. Well, now you've suddenly got a bunch of paperwork and headache to go through to allow him to just borrow your gun.
Well, you can't allow him to borrow your gun.
Right, that's what I mean. You can't. That's what I'm being facetious, of course.
H.R. 1112 would allow the government to arbitrarily delay firearms purchases for over 20 days and would make it more difficult for law-abiding Americans to defend themselves and their families. We hear Mark Barrett all the time tell us how the courts have ruled the police don't have a duty to protect us. Now they're going to take that possibility of self-protection away from us for up to 20 more days?
That's right. It's now 10 days, so they're going to double that. I get in California, I know it's 10 days. So they're going to double that to a national 20 days now.
Well, we should be able to walk into any gun store, buy any amount of ammunition we want, buy any weapon we can afford, whether it's a slingshot, a cap gun, water pistol. Doesn't matter. If it can be used to fight war, we should be able to have it. I'm of the firm opinion that armaments in the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, okay? Number one, does it say in that amendment how I should possess that weapon? Does it say that I can't hide it from you? It says I can keep it. how I keep, it's my choice, is it not?
That's true.
Okay. Now, bear the arm. Now, most states have changed the legal definition of bearing to brandishing. Well, if I have the right to bear an arm or brandish in the Constitution, now, why can't I do that? And why should I ask a court for permission to do so? Well, because they'll put me in prison.
That's right.
But they don't have the right to do that.
No. As a matter of fact, yeah, like you say, being able to walk in any gun store, sporting goods store, whatever, and purchase whatever firearm or ammunition you deem you want to buy, that's part of a freedom. I mean, and it's a private property issue too. Is when it boils down to it, an arm is a private piece of private property, and the government cannot tell you or force you to do anything with your private property.
Well, wait, they can. They may not. There's a difference.
Okay.
Is there not?
You got a good point, yeah.
They've already made the conscious choice to tell us. They're not going to allow us to do that.
Right.
But the rules we set forth for them say they may not do what they've done.
Right.
How do we correct that? Do we ask them for permission to do it anyways?
We shouldn't have to.
But we do.
Right. Oh, that's the conundrum.
We do. Poor Mr. Young. You know,
yep,
we got this in-bank hearing that he has to go through now. How much money is it costing him?
Right.
You know? For what? To ask permission to do something we're already authorized to do.
Good point.
How do we fix it?
You wonder. According to Mark Baird says not to lose faith, and it's a matter of getting control back. I think we've got to get control back by just people banding together. I mean, we've got how many gun owners would you estimate are here in California?
Mr. Mark Baird said 800 million in the state of California, or
I think it was 8 million.
8 million.
Yeah,
8 million.
Well, we only have 40 million. We only have 40 million.
So if just figure if we could all band together, we could actually take this state back and have a free constitutional state once again, how everything was supposed to be and meant to be by our founding fathers.
Well, I think we need to get it through everyone's head that all of these issues, at the core of all of these issues, is representation, not only on a state level, but on that federal level.
True.
If we got the House to repeal the Evergreen Apportionment Act, and let's just call it the Evergreen Apportionment Act of 1929 because it keeps redoing itself, holds the House at 435 seats, okay?
Right.
Holds the Electoral College, too. Unrepresentative position, okay? We're always hearing people argue that we need to get rid of the Electoral College. No, but we need to have it functioning as intended, and it as intended would mean that we at least add another 200 or 400 seats to the House of Representatives. How many folks do you think they get in there on a State of the Union speech in that same building that they'll tell us can't fit any more representatives?
Right. They all have their special invited guests.
Well, 435 plus another 435 plus their spouse, their neighbor, somebody, I guarantee you.
Yeah. 8
or 9. Well, we had 8 Supreme Court justices there this year, because Ruth's MIA.
Mm-hmm.
But I guarantee you we had over 1,000 people in that building.
Yeah.
So here we get the representation. Open that house up. Give us more there. Give us more in the state. We can fix all this ourselves.
That's right.
But when you got a man like Josh Harder that won't even call you back to discuss this issue of representation, how do you fix it?
We've got to come up with a voting block that's going to take back the state.
If we had representation, say we cut his in half, 750,000 to 770,000 people, cut it in half. Say it's 375,000 people. Let's get it back to the 250,000 people. Well, you got better access there.
This is true.
Maybe at what point is okay, federal judges are appointed for life, but that doesn't mean that they sit there for life. If these people commit high crimes and misdemeanors, violate the Constitution, there's a process to remove them, or there should be. We should be able to impeach a federal judge if their conduct is unbecoming.
I agree.
Got military men and women putting their lives on the line every day, and if they squeak wrong, conduct unbecoming charges, we throw them in the brig, keep them there for years.
That's right.
Why don't we have the same thing with federal judges, with speakers of the House, with governors?
Yeah, especially governors who violate the Constitution.
Well, we need to do something.
I agree. Okay, so what we've got here is California, their gun seizure program is having some troubles. Surprise, surprise. So basically, authorities here in California are struggling to enforce a state law that permits officials to seize firearms from people with previous criminal convictions or mental health issues. Staffing and budgetary issues have contributed to a massive backlog of guns marked for confiscation. So the law, which was passed in 2013 following the shooting of Connecticut's Sandy Hook Elementary School, set aside $24 million for a seizure program, had a goal of confiscating around 20,000 guns over the course of 3 years. But 6 years later, according to a San Francisco Chronicle report, there are still 9,000 of those guns out there, with more being added to the list yearly. And with the state's new governor now, Gavin Newsom, has made gun control a priority of his new administration and has proposed a multi-million-dollar increase to hire more agents. The program has reportedly been hit by retention issues and a lack of experience among new agents. Now, let me just step in there with my opinion of that. It seems to me that you have people who don't really want to go out and seize guns and who are constitutional and may have a problem with the actual issue of seizing guns from other people, from law-abiding citizens. So leave it to California Democrats to flex their muscles in a new supermajority with plans to pursue a gun tax and even more than that. This is just an unglamorous continual need to invest in the task and see it through. Former State Senator Mark Leno told the San Francisco Chronicle, "It just does not go away, and the job is never done." So when the law was first introduced in 2013, funding was available for about 4 temporary positions to supplement 42 Justice Department special agents. But retirements, transfers, and the like have kept the total number to around 57, and the department was forced to return $6 million of its $24 million increase. That's a lot of tax money. An additional $5 million was made available in 2016, but officials in the state say they've still had problems with hiring. Under California's Attorney General Xavier Becerra, 7 positions over the last year have gone unfilled. In the last year, agents were able to sign contracts guaranteeing they would stay on the force for at least 2 years. So they've had to get people straight out of college with minimum law enforcement experience, and they get to train them for about a year. And after they train them, they skip out and go to work for local district attorneys. So the problem here is retention, and people are using it as this. It's a waste of tax money. You see, it's just a stepping stone for these guys to go on to bigger and better things. So it sounds like it's just a tax rabbit hole to me. What do you think of that, John?
Well, if we get back to what gives them the authority to come get your gun? I mean, we have tragedies in this country. Sandy Hook. We have the school shootings in Florida, and we got some little kid, David Hogg, whatever you want to call this cat, telling us we shouldn't have guns, we shouldn't this, we shouldn't that. Telling you what, when I was in high school, if we had a gun, somebody came in our school and did that, they wouldn't have got too far. Not in Ceres. There were enough Aggies in Ceres High at the time that, somebody may or may not have had a weapon in their vehicle. I mean, we had canines there checking for weapons on a regular basis. Now, I don't condone kids taking guns to schools, but they were obviously running a dog through the parking lot sniffing for, drugs, alcohol, weapons, firearms, because those things happened.
Right.
They were there. But nobody come into the school and shot up a bunch of kids because they didn't know if the kids had weapons. They didn't know if the staff had weapons.
Right.
And number one, we're going to call them a weapon. I'm just going to sit here and call it an arm or an armament.
I was wondering when you were going to bring up the term arm.
See, nothing says it's limited to handguns, it's limited to rifles, it's limited to AK or ARs.
That's right.
I'm going to tell you right now, my viewpoint, which Aaron and Matthew probably already know. If I can afford a nuclear-powered submarine with nuclear-tipped Trident missiles and I got a place to park that big dude, well, that's my right under the Second Amendment. And if my government gets out of control, well, it's also my duty to pull that thing out of mothballs and let them know, here's the flag of John flying on the periscope, and we're going to have a talk about some stuff here. But that's all right. I mean, you're over there cracking a smile, but that's really where it is. That's really what it was meant to do.
No, I agree. It's to keep the tyranny, us to be able to take any tyranny that might creep up upon us.
Yeah,
but I totally agree. And missile sub would be nice to have.
Well, do you think that Nancy Pelosi or that type would be doing what she was doing if we were at the point of the Boston Tea Party, if we had those same rules? If it was the same social structure, I'm here to tell you they wouldn't. They would not be behaving the way they are.
Right.
And why? Because look what happened to the king. He couldn't even control it. The biggest army in the world at the time. Couldn't come in here.
Who?
Couldn't take our guns. Britain, Aaron. Britain.
Oh, the King of England, yes.
And who do you think has more fortitude? The King of England at the time or Nancy Pelosi today?
Oh, good question. I would imagine the king.
Well, he thought that his stuff was the best, right?
That's right.
Thing is, he knew at the time his was the best. But your rat tag guys with a couple hunting rifles, let's say, showed him his stuff wasn't the best.
That's right.
And they were doing the same thing then that's happening to us today. You can confiscate our weapons. Going to confiscate our only way to protect ourselves. Next, you're going to burn our homes. You seize our cars. Hey, my truck is an armament.
Yeah, that's quite an armament.
Well, can it be used for military purposes?
Certainly can.
Can your Toyota?
Certainly can.
Does the United States military not have recruiters driving around in Dodge and pickups and Toyota pickups? They do.
Yes, they do.
It's an armament. But yet, don't we pay for the right to possess that at the California DMV?
That's right.
People don't have to wonder where I stand. I'm telling you right now, everything they're taxing is an armament.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. You guys got anything else? Matthew, you have anything for us?
I don't. Thank you both for your time. It's been fun. As I said at the beginning of the show, we are still actively looking for sponsors, so please email us at sponsors@jeffersonlibertyradio.com, or you can head over to our website. We would love to hear from you. You can email us at feedback@jeffersonlibertyradio.com or via our website, again, jeffersonlibertyradio.com. We'd love to hear your questions and comments. Don't forget to subscribe to us in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review in those places. We'd really appreciate it, and it actually does help our ratings. You can find us on all the typical social media. Please follow us on Facebook. That is going to be the best place for you to get our latest episodes and information. So find us on Facebook. You can find it in the show notes for this episode or on our website. You can also follow us on other social media, Twitter. We're not as active there, but you can definitely find us there. You can also find our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and even some alternative media such as BitChute and Gab. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Jefferson Liberty Radio, and we'll catch you next time.